Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bolton of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about. From the New Deal's annual conference in Washington, D.C., today I talked to Milwaukee County Supervisor and Chairwoman Marcelia Nicholson. We talk about her journey from being a fourth grade teacher who was outraged at the lack of resources for her students, to an activist, to an elected official. We talk about how she tries to build divides in her state, the rural-urban divides, the economic divides, and the political divides that drive so much of our national rancor. She's got amazing strategies to address those and bring resources and fight for the community she represents. She's a remarkable public servant and may give us a path forward in these difficult times. Enjoy. Milwaukee County Supervisor and Chairwoman Marcelia Nicholson, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
It is great. We are at the New Deal Annual Conference,
Yes.
So we get to do the podcast in person, which is always
fun.
nice. Yes, and we love having you a part of New Deal.
Thank you.
I want to start with your journey to public service. You're
Yes.
an ed teacher, activist who ran for
Yes.
office to make change. Can you
Yes.
tell us what made you decide that you wanted to work inside the system than pushing it from the outside?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey to elected office was not a traditional journey. Where I grew up in Wisconsin, Milwaukee is the largest county in the state. I grew up in the poorest zip code and arguably the nation's, the 53206 zip code. There are documentaries about it. Home of mass incarceration, highest segregation in the country, most disparities in terms of education and health equities. It's been named the worst place to raise a Black child nationally. So that was my experience growing up. I did not realize that those experiences was preparing me for this. But what I did know was I had a legacy of public service in my family, and I had teachers who nurtured me and helped me escape from my surroundings and immerse myself in learning. And so when I was the first to go to college in my family, I decided to be a public school teacher. I taught fourth grade, and when I got to the classroom, I was so disheartened by the fact that my students were dealing with worse than I had as a child. Those disparities had grown. Those gaps had widened. And so I started getting active in the teachers union. I started organizing for better classroom conditions, teaching conditions, going to school board meetings, rallying with other unions and groups. And all of a sudden, my fellow colleagues and parents were, why don't you run for office? You really make this stuff make sense. And I said no for all the reasons in the world. And like a lot of women, I said no many times until a group called the Working Families Party came to Wisconsin. They sat a plan in front of me. They said, look, we have some open seats. You're the type of candidate we've been looking for. We think you should run. And for the first time, I saw that, okay, maybe I can do this. I got teachers, students on my doors helping me to just get the word out. And I won my first race with 65% of the vote. And then the bug bit me. I passed my first policy, which was a living wage ordinance for families in Milwaukee County. And from then on, I saw the tangible impact that good policy could have on the families I was serving. I ended up leaving education full time. It's been 9 years on the board now, and I absolutely love it.
Can you talk about how that experience and then also representing your constituency has informed your policy? How do you, what voices were missing in
Yes.
policy development at the table
Yes.
that you try to bring?
Yes, absolutely. And, I would be remiss if I didn't say how insecure I felt walking into that job, how unprepared I felt. I had no idea what I was doing. But as I said, my experiences growing up in that poor zip code, the experiences of my family members, my dad being from the South, my mom is Puerto Rican, their families all came up to pursue factory work that has since been sent overseas because of profit-driven decision-making. And, being a school teacher, hearing the fact that my students were coming to school hungry, that a big portion of my students were homeless, that they didn't have access to affordable health care and so forth. It really helped me understand what our families needed to thrive, to help level the playing field. And that has since informed so much of my policy. So being able to be a voice, not only for someone like myself, my family members, and my students, but also those people who, like me, just need a way in, right? Just need a door open. And I'm an organizer, through and through. So every policy I make is with the community at the center. They're showing up and they're testifying on the impact of these policies and what these would mean for their lives. And it helps my colleagues who don't necessarily have that lived experience better understand how important their vote could be. I haven't passed every single one of the policies, but I've passed dozens of policies and they've had tangible impact again, and some historic and national models as well. And being able to spread that voice throughout the country, again, is an impact that I get to have as an elected official.
What advice would you have for maybe a teacher who's frustrated with the conditions and materials in the classroom, a nurse who's on the front lines and not seeing the real disparities in our healthcare system? How do you recommend that they approach government, either advocacy or running for office in order to make change?
Yeah, and I understand how overwhelming it all could be. But, Michelle Obama, I think she's just incredible. And she said it best, just do something. Take one step forward, whether it's time, treasure, talent. Use your time to research what are things that are important to you. What are some of the organizations in community doing already to impact that issue? And how can you get involved with that issue? Maybe you don't have a lot of time, but you have some extra resources. So who are some of those candidates that are kind of popping out at you as representative of your voice? And how can you help them get that office and help to impact those policies? And your talent. Look, I didn't realize that as a teacher, it would prepare me so much to be legislative leader. It really is like wrangling cats. And
fourth graders and legislators.
Really, I mean, it's not that far off. It's not that far off. And the governor of Wisconsin is a former teacher. Governor Walz of Minnesota, who was VP candidate, was a teacher. And so we have such incredible talents that you wouldn't think would lend to the political field, but they really do, because our talent is in messaging and connecting to our students. We have to think about that as we connect to our voters. How can we share our message in a way that people can understand? Help us do that.
And you talked about, you haven't been able to get all the policies you wanted, but you've been able to get a bunch. Can you talk about some of the priorities that you've both had and gotten passed, and what you're looking forward to doing in the coming years?
Oh my gosh. It's been 9 years. So I have a lot of policy wins. Maybe some I'll get into the meat of them, but one of the proudest is I was the first in the nation to declare racism a public health crisis. So considering my background and the pervasive poverty in Milwaukee, we thought it important to first declare it, to acknowledge that it exists. Redlining, segregation, all of these things are impacting and why folks are in poverty still. From then, we created a strategic plan in Milwaukee County for the first time in 20 years. By achieving racial equity, Milwaukee will become the healthiest county in the state. So we apply this lens to every single policy now moving forward. This happened in 2019. Now every single policy and budgetary decision is done with a racial equity lens. We've been able to roll back some harmful policies and enact some not harmful, in fact, policies that help to meet that gap. Some of the other things I've done as a teacher, I'm an educator. I reestablished the Milwaukee County Youth Commission. We're the only youth commission in the state of Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
And we have, there's 18 supervisors, so 18 youth commissioners. They each represent a supervisory district, and they get to help make policy recommendations and budgetary decisions. And so many of our youth commissioners have since graduated to college, are now taking up public service or policy as majors, and they're excited to, I've heard I want to be the first Black senator in the state of Wisconsin, or I want to be president one day. And these are students who a few years ago didn't even know how to get their foot into the door. Some other fun things, housing is a big mantle of mine. So investing in affordable housing projects in the 27th Street corridor with the Near West Side Partners. And we're actually joined by Tom Perez, who's advisor to the president and intergovernmental relations in the White House. He joined us for the opening of our first Health and Human Services standalone building, where we dedicated $32 million in ARPA funds towards that project. And there's a community hub where we also invested in 120 new housing home for owner occupants, not renters. And that old Health and Human Services building will become affordable apartments and workforce housing. So we've been able to do some great things with that partnership with the Biden-Harris administration. And I want to continue, working on equity, working on housing, engaging our youth and families and in climate. We're on the Great Lakes. So, being a steward of our resources and making sure that we implement climate justice into our policies.
Can you talk about how Milwaukee and your position fits into the broader politics of Wisconsin? Obviously, we were all paying attention to it as a swing state, but you have real disparities
Yes.
In your state and really different rural urban divides and all that. How do you navigate that to get the best for your constituents?
Yeah, absolutely. So Milwaukee is so unique in the state of Wisconsin. Again, we're the largest county. The second largest is about half of our size. And we're one of maybe 5 blue counties out of 72 counties.
Wow.
And unfortunately, we've had not a great relationship with our state legislature, where conservatives are in the majority. And so it's really hard sometimes to, when we're in such a politically divisive climate, to impact change at the county. We're the arm of the state. So we rely on state funding for state mandated services. Prior to enacting, we just enacted a sales tax that I proposed with our county executive and mayor to roll back the first deficit, the first surplus in over 2 decades. Also helped increase shared revenue across the state. How we did that, we're basically sleeping at the state capitol. I'm a Milwaukee girl. I'm a city girl. I had never really traveled the rest of the state. There was a summer I touched almost every county.
Wow.
Just talking to folks, meeting them where they were. I'm on the board of directors now for the Wisconsin Counties Association, which is made up of all other counties, and none of them look like ours. So I definitely stood out in the room. But again, just being a face, sharing our priorities, sharing our vision, extending that olive branch led to some really important conversations that allowed us to make some progress. It's still not perfect, but it's getting better every year. So
tell me about going out there and trying to build bridges across what we all feel is such a divided country.
Yes.
And Wisconsin's a microcosm of that. How did you get them to see your priorities and have them resonate and support what you're trying to do?
Absolutely. I think the first thing for me was just working to build trust. Letting them know why I was there, which is in the interest of my community, which is Milwaukee, but also the state of Wisconsin. If Milwaukee thrives, the state of Wisconsin thrives. And if the state of Wisconsin thrives, we all thrive. And so just meeting them at the door and speaking their language. I'm a wonk. And so sometimes I have to remember not everyone has that same language. So using their language, and I was able to speak in front of maybe 1,000 rural folks. And in Wisconsin, we love potlucks, like a lot of other Midwestern states. And one of my lines was just talking about diversity and how we need to bring people to the table. And it's like a potluck. The more offerings we have, the better it is. And that really resonated with that crowd. And they were able to hear about an issue that could be very divisive, which is equity, and understand it at their level. So, speaking their language and just being visible, being willing to join them at their meetings in their towns. A lot of folks are, if they live in rural Wisconsin, they're afraid to come to the city. Well, that's fine. I'll drive 4 or 5 hours to the tip of Wisconsin so you can show me all the amazing things about your county. And they were so happy to do that. They were so happy to just have me walk in their front door. And I think that went a long way to helping advance those meetings in Madison.
Help all of us understand the state of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin, because it impacts all of us.
Yes.
And sort of, you had some big wins, but we also have obviously had a loss at the presidential level. What do we need to understand about the future of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin and what it looks like?
Yeah. First, I just, we have an amazing party chair in Ben Wickler. He has been a phenomenal asset to the Democratic Party. He's raised so much money and diverted it to good candidates all across the state, both statewide, state and local, and the staff. We have amazing staff. I will say some of our issues are related to what a lot of other states are dealing with, which is we're just in a very politically divisive time, and we're at a crossroads where we're having to figure out how do we appeal to the biggest tent possible. And we were plagued by some very hard issues, whether it was the conflict in Gaza, whether we're talking about trans rights, women's reproductive rights. We're still a very religiously conservative state in Wisconsin. And unfortunately, we lost votes from both our Black and Latino population, and our youth, who we typically think of as very liberal, have been swinging more conservative. So I think what the party has to do is just continuing to do the year-round engagement. We can't wait until election time. And unfortunately, Harris, she had 3 months, and I think she ran an incredible race, but she had 3 months to do it. And unfortunately, throughout her tenure as vice president, we didn't see her a lot because, and I can resonate with this because I'm an elected supervisor and our county executive gets all the attention. So while Biden was getting all the attention, Harris was working, but the people weren't hearing about it. So unfortunately, she only had 3 months to sell herself, sell her candidacy, and folks worked hard in Wisconsin, but we just didn't hit the mark. But we're fighting. People, we're going to continue to persevere, and we'll work with the party, build out the infrastructure, and again, do what we can to build the biggest tent possible so we can take the White House back.
What sort of policies would you like to see the Democratic Party pushing that would resonate with your constituents in more urban areas to get to both obviously improve their lives, but also have them be enthusiastic supporters of the party and our candidates?
Absolutely. I think doing a lot more of what they have been doing. The last 4 years haven't been perfect, but Milwaukee County, for instance, saw hundreds of millions of dollars getting pumped in through IRA, through ARPA, through CARES funding. And we were able to invest that money in life-changing projects, whether it is this Health and Human Services building, new affordable housing, business grants, community grants. We're reducing evictions. These are the things I think folks need and want to continue to see. We've also seen the reduction in prices on insulin and other medicines that people depend on, especially in Milwaukee, where we experience such health disparities. So I think housing policy, number one. This is an issue plaguing the entire country, but in Milwaukee, home ownership, especially Black home ownership, is one of the lowest in the country. And so providing people the resources they need, the education they need to be future homeowners, and that once they are able to purchase a home affordably. They can stay in those homes, and they can buy those homes in safe neighborhoods that have investments, and they're proud to live in those neighborhoods. Healthcare, we have to continue to prioritize healthcare, affordable medicines. And, another thing, Milwaukee, we have a young population. So, what are we doing on education? That's a big one. So I think continuing to work on those policies and getting the word out so folks understand who's really getting that work done.
I want to ask about your role. So you represent your district,
yes,
but you're also the chairwoman of the
yes,
board. So you have two different sets of constituents.
Yes.
What's the advice you have for folks who need to lead their boards, lead their councils, lead their caucuses, in terms of keeping a group cohesive?
Yes.
In policymaking?
Yes. You have to lead with humility, and you have to meet people where they are. I'm such so I bake on the side. And so this will be a little interesting because one thing I like to do is I love to share policy ideas. So sometimes I just wake up in the middle of the night like, oh, we should do something. And I'll call up a colleague the next day like, hey, I think you would be perfect to lead on this policy. And to help people accomplish wins, make it so they really appreciate your leadership and they want to continue working with you. And then what I also do is I bake. I bake for my colleagues. Every budget season, I do a little budget box of cookies and themed snacks and cakes. And it just sort of builds a sense of camaraderie. For the first time, I got a unanimous budget. So I like to think the cookies had something to do with that.
Those cookies must be really good.
I like to think that had something to do with it. Team building. So I love to host events throughout the county, help sort of promote our amenities, such as our cultural facilities, and just having more team building opportunities. Because what I found is it's not that none of my colleagues want to make change. They represent different constituencies, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic statuses across the county, and they all want to make good, but sometimes they don't understand each other. So just getting them all in the room, getting them the ability to get to know each other as people helps those debates on the floor be a little bit more intentional and about the policy and not the person.
I have a fourth grader.
Yeah.
I mean, it does sound like the exact same strategies. Yeah. We're working a fourth grade class,
yeah,
which is get them a little treats,
yes,
get them talking, yes, get them engaged with each other, yes, get them excited, let everyone play a role.
Take a few field trips.
And people are pretty happy.
That's right.
So tell me, you moved into this political sphere. It wasn't something that you were planning on your whole life.
Not at all.
You love it. How do you think about how to spend your time and what's next for you in terms of politics?
Oh man, how I spend my time? Well, I spend a lot of it in the field. I don't have children. I just got engaged.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I don't have children. And so I do have the time and luxury to do a little bit more in my community, which I love. I love to give back. I host events in our parks. One thing I do is Harvest Fest. It's a cross-sector collaborative event, public and private. We bring in hundreds of families into an inner city park, and we just have a great time.
Awesome.
So those are the sorts of things that I love to lend my time to, and just get to know the people that I serve on a personal basis. I don't want to just show up and knock on their door when it's time to get a vote. I really want them to know that I'm invested and I love the community. And so that goes very far. In terms of where I want to go, I don't know if I should tell you. It's not a big secret. I would love to go to Congress someday. So what I've learned in my work as a chairperson, as a county supervisor, is that people really depend on folks like us to deliver tangible impact. And I've been able to do that as a county supervisor. And I believe Congress is an opportunity to bring much needed resources back to our cities and our towns for, whether it's programming, business, infrastructure, and just be a voice for the voiceless. And when our current Congresswoman, who I absolutely love and adore, when she's one day ready to move on, I would love to throw my hat in the ring and join some folks out here and do some good things.
Absolutely. We need more people in Washington doing good things.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I believe it.
Well, we love having you on the podcast.
Thank
and we
you.
love having you in New Deal
Thank you.
bringing your ideas into the mix so that we can all learn from each other on both what to do, but also how to do it.
Yes.
I think there may be more cookies need to be made this year in 2025. That may be the first strategy. But thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ryan. This was great.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at New Deal for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.